is Clayton Howe's Entertainment X. For this episode, I chat with Samuel W. Gailey, and we cover a little bit of everything from his new novel, Come Away From Her, which will be out everywhere January 10th, 2023, and so much more, from fulfillment to work-life balance and, of course, writing. So I hope you enjoy this part one with Samuel W. Gailey. We're back. I'm Clayton Howe, and today with me on Zoom is Samuel W. Gailey. Sam, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. It's always fun to talk to folks.
This is going to be a great conversation. The themes in your writing and what I see fascinating you from afar, I really want to dive into. Of course, we're going to talk about Come Away From Her, a novel coming out January 10th, 2023, very, very soon. Before we get to any of that, I want to take it back to the beginning of time for you. What were your writing dreams growing up?
So as a kid, I was always interested in, writing short stories. I did not excel in math in school, but I did excel in English and just any kind of writing project. So I was always drawn to the written word. I don't think I had any preconceived notion that I didn't really think that an author could make money or that was really a career that you could have growing up. I was kind of really raised more by traditional parents, where you probably get a business degree and get into some kind of sales kind of profession. So the writing thing didn't really didn't start to ring bells until probably later in high school, actually. And the one time where I discovered that I had maybe a knack for compelling people and getting their interest was, I think it was in around 9th or 10th grade. We had a book report to do, and believe it or not, I didn't like to read books back in junior high school and high school, so I didn't read a book, and the assignment was coming up. And so the night before, I just made up a story and made up an author's name, and I turned it in to my English teacher. It was probably a 3 to 5 page assignment, and I got an A- on it. And I was like, wow, first of all, he didn't catch me. And secondly, that's not bad. So that was maybe my first thought that writing could be fun and maybe I could do something with this.
I love that. What was it? How long? Okay. So how long did it take you to turn that out? Was that just in a matter of moments? You just whipped it up?
It was the night before. I made it up. And if you asked me what it was about, I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Okay.
But it was just a fiction piece that I came up with. And I was smart enough to make up an author's name and not use a real author. So he couldn't track me in that way.
Sure.
Because, obviously there wasn't a lot of Googling back then when I was younger.
Yeah. And then was that the defining moment for you where you're like, this is something that I might actually want to make a career out of? Or did it take a little bit longer to get to that kind of?
I think it took a little bit longer. And it wasn't until I was in college that once I was an English major, and then I was really embracing reading, and I was really finding love of literature, and starting to do a lot of writing assignments and essays and projects that I kind of realized that this is something that I really would like to do. I still don't think I thought I could do it professionally. That really wouldn't come later until probably my, mid-20s, 30s.
And you grew up in I guess we can consider it a small town in Pennsylvania.
Very small. It was like 400 people in northeastern Pennsylvania. Yes.
Did that have a great effect on your imagination or the escapism of the mind, if you will?
Well, and if all of my work, writing both screenplays and my novels, I'm definitely drawn to isolation. I like genres that I work in. Isolation is a very compelling thing when your characters don't have a lot of other outside resources to try to help them get out of a situation. So growing up in a town of 400, you're obviously very isolated. Pennsylvania winters are very hard. So it's really informed my writing, especially with my novels. I typically put all of my stories, they take place in northeastern Pennsylvania.
Yeah. What did your parents growing up? What did your parents teach you about work ethic?
So, like I mentioned, as a kid, I didn't like to read.
Yeah.
I wasn't dyslexic. I just didn't have an interest, but I would read comic books, which my mother, who was an English major, did not really consider proper reading material. So she insisted from the time I was probably around 10 or 12 that I had to read 15 minutes every day from a book, a real book. You know, it could have been a Hardy's Boy book. It could have been, you know, all sorts of things. But so she laid that in there, and I resisted it for many, many years. And honestly, the first book that got my attention, and it probably rings the bell for many, is Catcher in the Rye. My mom said, well, try this one. And I was probably in 11th grade. And that book really, really kind of changed my perspective on writing and reading. That character is iconic, William Caulfield. And it obviously it's really inspired many people. But that is probably the one book that really kind of made me open my eyes and think, wow, okay, there's a whole world here. There's a whole thing with books and where you can go with a story.
Did you have early on, did you have mentors, or do you have mentors? And are there any standout lessons that come to mind?
I would not say I had traditional mentors, especially growing up in the country. You know, it was a very traditional education. Probably my wife, Anne, is my mentor through most of my life. She's been an inspiration to me. She's also a writer. She's written her own memoir, and she's had a film made on one of her books. And she's just an inspiration. She's just a great editor. She's very creative. She's very passionate. She thinks differently, and she really inspires me. So there's been times in my career where I didn't know if I had the fortitude to keep going, and Anne was there to say, no, this story is worth telling. And she had a bigger faith in my voice than I did at some time. So I guess Anne would be my mentor. And she's not here in the room, by the way, but she'll probably maybe hear this later.
You're not being paid to say it right now. No.
No, that's exactly right.
I think it's so wonderful when you have a life partner, you're married to someone, partnership that can influence the work in such a great way. You know, when you have any self-doubts that creep in, being able to check in with that partner, I think it's priceless.
Well, especially, a writer's life is there's a lot of isolation and solitude when you're a writer of any form. So, and a lot of people might not understand that. So to have a partner, a wife that understands that need to write, that desire to tell a story, and understands that it takes a long time. And that is so pivotal in my career, that I've had that kind of person behind me. And I do try to do the same with her, because she has her own, writing pursuits.
Writing a novel, and I can only guess based on reading your novels, that it's a lot of work, and it's a real commitment. And I wonder, when a new idea comes into your mind, pops into your head, is there a vetting process, or is it just something that it keeps recurring in your mind and you're like, I have to get this on paper? Or is it really just that conversation with the other to see if it's worth flushing out further?
Yeah. So with my stories, typically they're very character driven. So I kind of come up with the character first. And then once an idea really hits and I feel excited about it, now that I've been through the process a few times, I understand that, it takes me 3 to 4 years to start a book and finish a book and deliver a book. So you really have to be passionate about that idea, those characters, because to live with that for that long, you need to really find a lot of hope and fun and inspiration in your story and your characters, because you live with them almost every day. Because I write pretty much every day. And it's not like a project that you're on for 2 weeks and then then you move on to the next. So with a novel, it's a long process. So I definitely have my own process of, once I know the story's the one I want to tell, then how I get into it and how I form it is something that is a process that works for me.
How much research are you doing with, prior to like really getting into it and writing the novel?
It depends book to book. The first book, Deep Winter, the main character suffers he had a brain injury when he was a child. So there's a lot of developmental issues that this character had as he became an adult, a man. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to be very aware of that. So it was a couple things. So I did a lot of research on those kind of individuals that are struggling with some kind of mental challenge, mental handicap. And really that story was inspired by someone I grew up with in Pennsylvania. He was a friend of mine in junior high school. He was, a big kid, bigger than the rest of us, but he had a lot of developmental challenges. And back when I was going to school, all kids were put in the same classroom, right? We were on the same track, whatever your level of education was or ability. And he was just this unique person where all he wanted to do was be a truck driver, right? That was his dream, to drive an 18-wheeler truck when he grew up. And so he could draw sketches of trucks. When he would walk down the hallway in school, he would make the sound of a truck. If he had to back up, he would make like he was backing up his whole rig. Huh. It was amusing and compelling, but it was his world, right? And that's all he wanted to do. And as I was thinking about my first story, I was thinking, what would happen to someone like my friend if he was accused of a brutal crime, a murder? How could he defend himself? And it was kind of with that what was the germ of the idea for Deep Winter. But to answer your question about the research, I read a lot of other books about characters of a similar maybe affliction, like of Mice and Men, the book Push by Sapphire, even Forrest Gump, the novel, where the main character was someone that wasn't fully developmentally, and their journey through the story. So that was the research with Deep Winter.
You've been listening to Entertainment X, the podcast. You can follow Entertainment X on Instagram at _EntertainmentX_. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join Clay next week for another curiosity conversation on Entertainment X. Thank you for listening.